Hey, what is going on everyone? Mekkah here, and welcome back to the biggest Fire Emblem tier list that you've ever seen. We are going to tier every single Fire Emblem character in the series, and my Patreons decide who goes next. And these were submitted in August, so I'm going to go over them real quick. If you want to help me out, support me on Patreon, help me make bigger videos that take longer to make, like scripted videos like Pitfalls, Waifu, that kind of stuff, then feel free to support me on Patreon, helps a lot, and you get to submit cool characters like this. If not, that's fair. Only donate if you can afford it. So let me go over the units that have been submitted by my current Patreons. So we have Gifka, submitted by Lyrex. Was submitted to me on Discord and I missed it when compiling the ones for last time, so that's why we have one last Path of Radiance unit on here. Thanks for submitting. Then we have some Radiant Dawn units. Alexis submitted Vika, Rexecuse submitted Mekkah, Arkholt submitted Rolf. We have Lazy Bison who submitted Jill, and Soth as well. We have Heston who submitted Tironio, Edwin who submitted Janaf, Autistic Biden who submitted Mia, Dorian who submitted Mathis from Shadow Dragon. Also from Shadow Dragon is Corey's submission of Minerva. Then we have some new mystery units. Jesus Kun 69 submitted Luke, Great Dane submitted Caesar, and requested that I don't hold back on that analysis, so sure thing. Lyrex also submitted Nina. Melvin Liu submitted Cecil, or Cecil. The Elephant submitted Matilda from Shadows of Valentia, and from that game we also have Celica submitted by Modern Mind. Abaddon 1810 submitted Dean. Moo submitted Bowie and Pala. Hugo submitted Forsyth. Kim submitted Sonia, and Blue Caterade submitted some Three Houses boys. We got Lane Hearts and Kaspar here, and then Sire Thylol submitted Shamir, and Ethan submitted Cyril, and for some reason Cyril fell off my tier list. I don't know why. Let me just grab him real quick. There we go. Can't just leave him out, can we? So that's the whole squad. Let's get into tiering them. So Gifka is from Path of Radiance, and he only appears if you pick him, and in hard mode he only appears after you've beaten Ashnard's first form. Now, I sort of get what they were going for by making the game harder by making this change from normal mode to hard mode, but I don't really like it because it kind of negates the whole failsafe aspect of a Goto. If you want people to be able to take on Ashnard with, like, if they got an RNG screwed Ike or they didn't train him for some reason, then like the other failsafe you get is like Enna, who is not very good at it. I think she gets doubled by hard mode Ashnard, and Gifka would have been really nice to have because no one else can damage Ashnard. So I think when it comes to like being a failsafe, being a Goto in that way, he does a pretty poor job. As a unit though, other than that, he's pretty fine for a unit that's only around for one chapter or like one half of it. Like obviously he's really beefy, really strong. I believe he can one round plenty of enemies. Doesn't have to worry about transformation gauge because he's got that Laguz ring going on. Only one range, unfortunate, but doesn't really take away any of his combat prowess. I don't believe he doubles Ashnard on hard mode, which is unfortunate, but he still does like a pretty big amount of damage. I do believe that, you know, if you don't really care about which Laguz Royal you get, but you plan on transferring your file, it's best to, you know, pick Gifka because he joins with capped strength and you can transfer that to Radiant Dawn. And Gifka in that game will then get +2 strength untransformed, which means +4 strength transformed, which is, you know, pretty goddamn good. I think generally you're best off picking him. Maybe Tabarn, but generally I like him best. It's not like Tabarn has Kanto and Path of Radiance, and that would be his biggest draw. Flying is kind of cool though, doubling is pretty cool too, but Gifka's pretty strong. It's just when you only have one chapter of availability, there isn't a whole lot I can do for you to get you higher on the tier list. I'm going to put him roughly where people like Orson and friends are. I don't think I have Aethos on this list yet, but that is someone I would sort of compare him to. A little worse, because Aethos can carry the entire final chapter. It's like if Aethos joined only to fight the Fire Dragon. And then in hard mode, and then Hector hard mode, he joins after the Fire Dragon or something. You get what I mean, right? It's like, I think he's worse than Kanigas for sure, because Kanigas, for example, is around for the entire Tower of Radiant Dawn, which is longer than just that little bit of, you know, availability that Gifka has. Like, Gifka actually has a significantly lower availability than everyone else, because not only is he around for only one chapter, but he's only around for the part where you fight Ashnard. At that point, like, most of the map could be dead. So, I honestly think it's fair to put him, like, maybe even in D tier. He's really not around for much, but he's not bad. Like, again, never use a tier list to determine who to use for all game, because as you're going to see with the Radiant Dawn units, some units are just really, really good for a very limited amount of time, and it makes them really good for that portion of time, but it's pretty hard to reflect that in a big tier list that takes availability into account. But I want to take availability into account, because otherwise, I don't think it's fair to say that Athos, for example, contributes more than someone who's been around for all game, but never really is your best unit ever. Like, I wouldn't say Athos is better than someone like Raven, for example, even though Athos is clearly better than Raven when they're both around. So that's why we have to take availability into account somehow, and it ends up making things look a little weird. Someone like Nefany, for example, could never 1v1 Gifka, you know? But Gifka is still a lot less helpful overall, I feel like, when it comes to the whole game. I know this is like FE10 Nefany, but you get the point, hopefully. Next we have Radiant Dawn, and we got Vika. And I wish Vika was around longer, but she's not, so another big problem with availability. She joins with the Laguz Emancipation Alliance. I believe that's what they're called. Emancipation? E-girl Emancipation. Either way, I think if she was like, if you judge her by just the time she's around, she's like alright, but not great. I like her in a joining chapter, and the chapter after that, being able to fly around is obviously nice. It kind of sucks that you're limited on like Laguz Stones and Leafy Grass. I don't think there's even like Laguz Stones available for her when she's first around, which is very unfortunate. I mean, she has to grass up a little bit, maybe face some enemy combat to get all the gauge up. I know it's not like optimal, but it's something you could do. I think some people are under the impression that she helps you save civilians in the swamp. For me personally, it's not the case, because I prefer to use a strategy that just completely negates the need for her to fly over to the civilians in the first place, and it generally involves shoving Tormod into the swamp so he can fight that Wyvern Rider that spawns in the bottom right corner. And once you take that guy out, the civilians are generally not in much danger as long as you hurry up and take out the brigands from land, so you don't really need her flying utility much. I don't remember if she can actually pick up civilians. I think she can, but I generally don't really find a great use for it. I still think I'm going to give her like a decent rating for those chapters alone, even though, if only because it's all she has. But for example, the final chapter of part 1, I just don't deploy her at all, because at that point you have so many units who are better, even though she sort of is kind of like a pre-promote, like she gains jack shit for EXP. She's stronger than someone like Leonardo at base, but she's not exactly strong. Like, her strength is still kind of garbage. She's very fast though, and very lucky. Like, it's pretty hard to hit her, but it's really hard to get her to work too. You can do it in one endgame. You can have her like get up on the ledges pretty easily and stuff, but I just don't find it worth it compared to the alternatives. You have so many other good units at the point, and if you're training someone like, even not just Nolan, but someone like Edward or Leonardo, of course you want to deploy them to the final chapter, even if they're worse than Vika. I'm not saying they are, but even if they are, you kind of want to, because otherwise, what's the point of training them, right? So it really sucks, because I know a lot of people like Vika's design. I'm personally not like super big on it, but I appreciate why people like it so much, and it sucks that this is just one of the many units screwed over by Radiant Dawn's system. I have a lot of talking about Radiant Dawn's systems to do. This is not really the place for it. The question is Vika good? The answer is not really, because after part 1, there's just not much left for her. She's absent for part 2 and part 3, and then she rejoins in the last possible chapter, in chapter 4 before endgame, in a chapter where she's so underleveled and underpowered that she can't do anything. At the very least, Tormod can do like meteor shenanigans. At the very least, Muarim has sort of redeemable stats in part 4 if you really wanted him to. Vika just has nothing. But if you want to use her, what you can do in part 4 is go to her chapter and then go back to the base after she's joined, and then you can just actually change her equipment and everything, which is a pretty neat trick. But it doesn't really help her make her good. You kind of wish like she had a better strength growth so you could like bonus experience it up, but she doesn't, so she's never really going to get strength from that. And Laguz caps are so high you can't even like abuse the 3 stats per level trick with bonus experience. Just all around pretty big failure of a unit. Somewhere in D tier I think she goes. Bottom of D tier, maybe even E tier. I don't think she's bad enough for E tier. Maybe she is, but I'm gonna say she's a little bit better than these guys over here, because of her like limited but existent part 1 utility. I do agree with whoever said, by the way, that Carrion might not belong this low. He's probably a little better than Robert and some of these goons over here. Sure, but still think he's pretty trash though. Mekkah, you know, she has a slot in game, unlike Vika. I guess that's good. I really like Mekkah's design. I really like the uniqueness that Mekkah brings as a female lord that uses light magic. Like, talk about a difference from blue-haired dude that uses a sword. I think it was great that we got something different. But I think for Mekkah, they really could have done with better balancing of her and her whole squad. Every time I start playing Radiant Dawn, I feel like, yes, I'm going to use Mekkah now. I'm going to feed her kills and make her good, make her strong, you know, one-shot things. But every chapter, and this goes for like the whole Dawn Brigade, every chapter after she joins, she gets a little relatively worse compared to her peers. First chapter, you only have like 2-3 units, so obviously she's one of your best by default. Nolan joins, completely outclasses her. Soth joins, Voluk joins, Jill joins, Tyronio, Nyla, Black Knight, the whole squad. And they all just kind of invalidate the need for someone like Mekkah, even though there are things she can do well, like one-shot armor knights, if she's trained up well enough, using her Thani nuking, whatever. But once you have enough units that can one down enemies and survive much better than she can on enemy phase, because she's so squishy, she has like no defense or HP to speak of, and she gets doubled a lot too. So once you have units that can just survive enemy phases and kill off enemies with like, even with someone like Zyhark is so much better than she is at combat, there's just no reason to try and take the slow approach. Like, early on, you kind of need her chip damage to get enemies down because your means of killing is so limited. Like, early on, one of your best units is Nolan, and he needs help to kill enemies, so why not use a chipper like Mekkah or Leonardo? But as the game goes on, the need for this just completely evaporates, and Part 3 onwards, I do like that she has a free promotion to a staff unit. You don't even have to put XP into it. She just promotes and gets stabs, and you can physic and torch and stuff like that. That stuff is pretty good and pretty useful. Keeping other units alive. You can go in pretty deep with someone like Nolan or Jill in the Part 3 chapters, knowing that Mekkah is available to heal them. That's pretty cool. And a pretty underrated part of her utility, I think. Part 4, you need this a little less. Part 4 is more about like just flyers running around using concoctions and elixirs. And usually Mekkah is less useful, but at least she can still like restore people from L sleep or something. I also like that she's free in endgame, unlike a lot of other units. I always thought it was a pretty big pro of a lot of units. That's why I think she's better than a unit like, I don't know, Meg or Fiona or those kind of units, because you still need to, like, first of all, you need to train them to make them good. Mekkah can be good with stabs without training, but you also need to slot in them in endgame when they're at their highest potential, whereas Mekkah just gets in for free. And it's also one of the reasons why I really like Gareth, for example. So I think that puts Mekkah at the very least in like C tier. I don't think she's terrible. I just don't think she's someone you want to train up as like a combat unit for all game long, because you just don't get much out of the investment, and she's a constant liability when it becomes for durability. I do think she's probably a little better than Roy because of the staff utility that she's got. I would say that's more useful than Roy's like end game performance. But I do think Atlas and Heather. I don't know about Heather, actually. Maybe Heather should move down. I do think that Atlas is maybe a fair bit better than the units I've got here, so maybe just move Atlas up a little bit. I've really been liking him as a Hunter's Volley bot now, but it took a while to get to, admittedly. But he's a lot better than I thought he would be at first. I think when I tiered him first time, I just hadn't really trained him. So I was always looking to reevaluate him. I do think Mekkah is more useful than these units. Yeah. Around here seems fair enough. Yeah, the staff utility and the freeness of her utility is nice. But I would not recommend traditionally training up and meticulously feeding XP to Mekkah to anyone. Maybe a first-time player, just because it always feels bad to not train your Lord on your first playthrough. But if you're familiar with Radiant Dawn, I see no reason to actively put a ton of XP in Mekkah. LTCs are another story altogether. LTCs, if you want to get the absolute lowest turn count, you kind of need a strong Mekkah just to get lowest turn counts. But that is beyond the scope of this tier list. Next is Rolf from Radiant Dawn. I think I sort of mentioned that in Radiant Dawn he has a little more potential than his FV9 counterpart. FV9 is just like, it just feels bad, man. Rolf, I mean, he's still not good. He's still not great in Part 3 with the Grill Mercenaries. But at least you can do some cool tricks. At least you have the triangle attack to work with to do some cool stuff. There's these videos by Leopold's Touch. I think I touched on this last time, where he has like, Rolf is like the MVP of those triangle attack videos because he can attack from so many different squares and do so much damage, just getting guaranteed crits and hits with Boyd and Oscar. But those gimmicks aside, Rolf still joins in Part 3 with stats worse than everyone else. He's not as far behind as he is in Path of Radiance, and there is means of salvaging him. He does have pretty standout strength growth. I think he can cap his strength early enough, and he can actually patch up his speed issues with bonus experience if you have the patience. So there's some potential there. But it really feels bad to use him when you have a completely superior Shinon running around, and there really isn't too much room for using both. There's only one of each good bow, like Silencer and Double Bow, so the payoff of using both is just not really there. And you don't really want to use more than one. I would argue you'd only want to use 0 if you're being optimal. I really don't think Shinon and Radiant Dawn is as good as a lot of people make him out to be. He doesn't one round, not even with short bows or what it is called, crossbows. And his stats may be good, but as the game gets more and more enemy phase focused, units like Rolf and Shinon just can't do the work that you want them to in like late part 3 and early part 4. I take into account like how good their stats are, I know, but it's just no enemy phase is a big death sentence in the big route maps that Radiant Dawn presents in late 3 and early Act 4. So with that in mind, Rolf's potential is painfully limited. Still a fun growth unit to train. You can still get somewhere if you want him to, and if you just want to see big numbers there and you don't mind putting training in. In fact, a lot of people enjoy training up units, getting them from 0 to hero. One thing I do personally like for Rolf, personally, is using him in early part 1, especially the first chapter that he's in, to shoot ballistas at like enemies, just a little bit of guerrilla warfare. I think it was one of the greatest bits of like story gameplay integration of Radiant Dawn. Ranulf goes to Ike and he's like, hey man, we should do some guerrilla warfare, and you guys are more experienced with that. And yeah, then they use ballistas to take down enemy mages and stuff. That's pretty fun, I gotta say. That whole chapter otherwise is a pretty big mess though, but I always enjoyed that little bit of it. I think Rolf is a solid like D tier. It's like someone who you can use if you want to, but he's not that great. I would say, and by solid I mean like pretty bad, I'm not gonna lie. I swear I'm not putting him here just because these are both young archer boys. I swear, that's not the cause here. I think it's actually a little bit worse. I'll put him like around here somewhere. Has potential, just not much reason for his potential, and his class is pretty bad. Next is Jill from Radiant Dawn. Of course, she knew this day would come. I think we already got our FE9 counterpart in here. So Jill was a pretty divisive unit. I think a lot of people think I'm a huge fan of Jill. The truth is I go back and forth on her quite a bit. Depends on what mode I've played last, generally I find. If I play easy or normal mode to get footage or to check something or just because I feel like it, then Jill was absolutely amazing. Probably the best unit in the game. I would argue you could put her better than Har, but I think that's like a pretty big debate, and it really depends on what you value in a unit. But she's up there with Har. She's easily, if she's not the best, then she's the second best unit in the game in normal and easy mode. Hard mode though, I find that Jill gets hurt quite a lot by that. The ability to give her XP and bonus experience like greatly diminishes, because hard time effectively gives you like half battle experience, I believe, and then for bonus experience it gives you like effectively 4 times less, because the bonus experience you get is worth half, but you also get half as much, and that hurts Jill because she's a really big user of bonus experience, both to catch up in level and to get the stats that she needs. She has a pretty good shot at getting speed on a bonus experience level even without capping anything. And in tier 2, she's really good at capping stats, and then you can abuse that to get more strength, for example, and more defense as well, which are stats that she's like okay at, but you really want more out of it. You want more out of those stats almost always. They're super good. Her low base HP is a pretty big problem. She has like a base is just not very good, but she's by far the best candidate for every single stat booster you get on the Dawn Brigade. Items like the Angelic Robe, Energy Drop, Draco Shield, those pay off so much. Having a flyer that can take an extra round of combat or multiple extra rounds of combat pays off so much more than having Nolan take an extra hit. The only reason I like giving the Draco Shield or the Robe to Nolan is because he can use them a lot earlier, so you get more value out of them early on. But I would argue that as the game goes on, especially in late part 3 and really all of part 4, Jill sees so much more action that it honestly is like compensated in Jill's favor. But I'm not going to count that as free stat boosters for Jill, because that's not how everyone plays, and it's not fair to just, you know, pretend she has those stat boosters for free always. You can give them to other units, but she's by far the best user of them, and I think she deserves credit for being able to use resources to her advantage. Same goes for the access to like a Forged Iron Axe. Those are basically infinite if you manage your resources well. So there's no question to me that Jill belongs in the upper regions of the tier list. The question is she an S- of an S+ kind of unit? Right now I have Marcia from FE9 in S+, Path of Radiance Jill in S-, along with a couple of other like mediocre flyers. I don't know if I put Jill in S+. I have a pretty hard time convincing myself to do that. I do think she's close. I'm thinking like the top of S- is probably the perfect fit for her. She's great. She's absolutely marvelous in Radiant Dawn, especially when she's coming to her own. But she needs some training, some work to get good. Kind of like Seliph in a way, who is an S+, but I think he stands out a little bit more than Jill does. I think even with training, Jill in hard mode has some trouble surviving the onslaught that is like the Dawn Brigade Part 3. But still never recruit her to the Guerrilla Mercenaries if you want an easy time in the Dawn Brigade. The Dawn Brigade gets much more utility out of Jill, I find. The Guerrilla Mercenaries chapters at that point are just kind of, you know, fun slaughter fast for your units. It's just so easy. Jill really doesn't need to be there. The Guerrilla Mercenaries don't need another mouth to feed to get it to tier 3 promotion. Have her in the Dawn Brigade chapters always. It's much better. So much XP available for her. Whether you want to use Beast Foe or Paragon, both of those are great for her. Jill can actually one turn chapter 312, the one on the cliffs, if you want to. It still takes forever because enemy phases are that long, but she can actually clear the whole chapter in one turn if she got the right equipment. It's so funny to see, but it takes forever. Anyway, Jill good. I love Jill. But she can be a little tricky to use sometimes, but she has the best payoff out of almost any unit in Radiant Dawn. Next on the list we have Soth, one of the most unusual Jagans in the Fire Emblem series, considering he is a rogue, whereas most of them are like paladins or at least some kind of horse-related class. But Soth's like, nope, I'm a rogue, and I'm going to use knives, which is something that almost no character's ever used before in that point in the series. Soth joins in, I want to say 1-2, a little into the map, and he's your best unit when he joins, and he's going to stay that way for quite a while, at least for 1-3. 1-4, and then 1-5 is when you get some competition from Volug, and then 1-6 you get some more from Tyronio, and then you get the Black Knight and Nyland stuff. I think Soth's biggest advantage over those units, besides his availability, is his 1-2 range. Having access to ranged knives, especially forged ones that can actually hit stuff, is pretty good. Comparatively, someone like Zyhark has access to Wind Edge, but they are much worse, especially when it comes to accuracy, and sometimes Might. I don't remember offhand which one of them has more attack with ranged weapons, but the point is he is super effective against mages. Is capable to like one-round KO the ones in 1-5, for instance. Soth's perp 1 performance is an easy 5 stars, even though in endgame he's probably surpassed by like maybe not your main combat trained units, but units like the Black Knight obviously run circles around him, at least when it comes to, you know, surviving and killing stuff. But nonetheless, he's absolutely great. Part 3 rolls around, and suddenly he's a lot worse. He is a weapon that's effective against Laguz, the beast killer, but unfortunately that thing doesn't one-hit KO Laguz, so that means he has to like double them and get a counter, and Soth gets 2-shot, so that's not too great for him. He has an A support with Mekkah, but even with that and a force, he's not going to reliably dodge Laguz, so exposing him is just a good recipe to get a game over generally, and that makes him much worse, and it only gets worse from there. I don't believe he one-rounds any of the enemies in 312, unless there might be some mages or Pegasus Knights he can one-round, but I really don't think there are. And yeah, both of the Laguz maps in Part 3 for Dawn Brigade are just bad for him. And when Part 4 rolls around, the first problem is he's never getting his promotion until halfway through the normal Part 4 chapters. And even once he gets his promotion, it's still like very subpar. The big problem is low strength cap, and knives just have very bad might. There's barely any good God Brigades for them. They never really surpass like 10 might, I think, before you get like the endgame worthy ones. There's like 2 S or S plus SS rank knives that exist. You got like the base lard, you got this other thing, but neither of them really fix his main issue. 4E1 is like the last endgame map where Soth can really do anything, and he still doesn't do anything. He can like open a chest or maybe try to hit a general, but he's not going to one-round them without some serious luck. He does have that weird mastery skill. I forgot what it's called, but it's not lethality, it's the other one, Bane, and apparently brings enemies to 1 HP. I've been told that it's not actually possible to miss out on kills because of it, but people were like afraid to use it because what would happen, what they were afraid of was like that Soth would actually not one-round an enemy because of it. Like imagine an enemy who would normally 2-hit KO, main activates and just fails to kill him because of that, because it leaves him at 1 HP. But someone else claimed that like, hey, you actually can't, that can't happen, the game prevents that from happening. I've never seen any confirmed tests on this, so if someone wants to test that with Soth in Radiant Dawn, please do, because I'm very curious what the answer is. So you can imagine with a unit like this, it's very hard to rate him for his performance, because like I said, Part 1, easy 5-star, easy like S plus tier unit probably, depending on what exactly you ask. Maybe not in end game, but like early on, sure. But Part 3 and Part 4 is pretty bad. So I would say somewhere in the middle, still like in the A tier, I feel like. He's that important in the early game, he stands out a lot more, compared to like how much he doesn't stand out in Part 3 and 4, if that makes any sense. So I'm gonna put him pretty high still, but I always have some trouble rating a unit like that, like 5 stars or S tier, when they really do fall off. Like Soth, no matter how good his growths are, and they are really good, he's just gonna fall off in performance, no matter what you do. Even if you feed him every single kill in Part 1, he's just not gonna be as good. So I'm gonna put him in A+ still, like over some of these units, but not too high, because I feel like his performance for it to be like S tier, I think it would have to be more consistent throughout the whole game rather than just part 1. And even late in part 1, he's surpassed by some other units, so he's not your best unit for longer than like a little over half of part 1. Then we have Toronio. Joins in 1/6 is one of those units that kind of eclipses Soth, because really Sonia is one of these units that just one-rounds everything while holding a javelin or one hand behind his back. You could probably give him a bronze lance and he would still one-round just about everything. He's super strong. There's like one enemy on all of 1/6-1 that has a hammer that can do significant damage to him, and that's the only one. So everything else is kind of pinks off him, and you can even survive the hammer, get in resolve range, and just become even stronger if that's even needed or, you know, existent. But he's only around for 1/6 and that's it. After that, he's gone. He's really good in that chapter, but he's not in the end game, and he's not in 1/7 or 1/8 or even 1/9 for that matter. Part 3, he's also not in 3/6. He only rejoins you for 3/12. I really like him in that chapter. He has a pretty good starting position. You cannot really put units in his starting position, so he can like go down that ledge and guard it and fight a bunch of enemies using hand axes. If he's not doubling, which is likely, then he's gonna take a while taking down all the enemies there, so it's not super efficient. But he does hold up the ledge to prevent people from like Mekkah or Laura or NPCs getting like barraged by enemies climbing up the ledge. That's pretty good utility. And in 3/13, he can also like run down to fight a couple of the goos, guard a ledge. He can survive a couple hits and dish one out. He's not invincible. He's not like the Black Knight, but he's still pretty strong in those chapters. I would say he's alright. Part 4, I don't think there's much purpose in using him. This is bothering me. I'm gonna move down my thing a little bit. There you go. I don't think he's nearly as good in those parts. So in a way, you could say that Toronio has like somewhat similar utility to Soth, but like a lot less availability. I don't think he's a very good unit for part 4. I've never really tried using him. I think in normal mode you can kind of make him double stuff. I remember for certain speedruns they would actually bonus experience Toronio to be certain level for part 4, so that you could double certain enemies on like a Tibaran group, I think, because I think he's locked into that one actually. So he's alright there, but he's not like not spectacular, and definitely not as good as someone like, I don't know, Mia, for example, part 4. So I'm gonna put him like somewhere with B tier, and I just lost him in the tier list, so that's great. Where are you at, Toronio? Where are you at? Let me find him real quick. Alright, I actually had to reset it a little bit. So Toronio, I think he goes up somewhere in like the B tier, maybe a C tier. Very limited utility. Radiant Dawn units are like notoriously hard to rate. I feel like it's a little worse than Radiant Dawn's Zyhark overall. Depends. Zyhark probably has more long-term utility, more depth, if you will. But I feel like it's worse than Toronio when they're sharing availability. And, you know, you get the most out of Toronio by kind of dumping him after part 3. Whereas Zyhark gives you the option of having a trained unit for part 4, even though it's not optimal. But I do feel like they're similar in strength overall, because they both have their pros and their cons in that way. And I personally think Toronio is more useful if you don't plan on long-term using Zyhark. But if you want to train one of these units long-term per se, then Zyhark is more useful. So I think in that way they're kind of similar. But I could see it go a little bit differently too. But for now, I'm going to put Zyhark a little above Toronio. Janaf, I rated Ulki last time, so basically it's going to be the process of finding Ulki to like tier him. Again, a Hawk Lagoose joined in like halfway part 2, part 3, along with Ulki. We talked to him with Raisin in the swamp map. Joins at a point where the part 3 maps are pretty easy, because at this point I feel like most of the mercenaries have outgrown the enemy by so much that it's kind of like a stomping almost. You have like Ike, Mia, Har, Titania, all of them capable of doubling and often one-rounding enemies. Ike hasn't promoted yet, but he can still do it most of the time. And soon enough he'll get the Ragnell one-round everything. So I don't think Janaf adds too much combat, even though his combat is like super good. But he adds some flexibility because he's a flyer, and he can get to places that others have a hard time getting to. He just has more mobility than a lot of people. Of course, the big drawback is no true range and reliance on Lagoose gauge. But if you're going to be a Lagoose in Radiant Dawn, I feel like joining in part 3 when you have a plenty supply of like Olivia Grass, you can buy them in almost every shop at this point. And especially in part 3, I believe they're like always in the bargains, I think, the Olivia Grass. And you get a couple free ones. You get Lagoose Stone as well. And you're accompanied by a pretty good Lagoose and Raisin, who can Lagoose Stone himself and then dance for these units to get like extra turns to Olivia Grass up. And their enemy phase is so good against one-range enemies that they don't always need to use their player phase to attack. You gotta keep an eye on their gauge, but most of the time he'll be okay, I think. You can also make use of like tactical reverts at some times, so just don't expose him to enemies for a turn, just revert to preserve gauge and then gain a little bit over the turn, and transform back next turn, because they have plenty of mobility. Pretty fast support with Ulki. I think it's wind, water, so it's a couple points of extra might. The big differences between Ulki and Janaf is generally that Janaf has a bit more might. whereas Ulki is more avoid based. I think the might is very useful for them because it usually translates to a lot more damage. We take into account the fact that their stats double when they transform and then they double attack, and they can have stats that things like Adept going on, for example. Janaf starts like scarily close to having tier. I believe he's one level closer than Ulki if my memory serves, which I think is also a pretty big advantage for him. I try not to give them adepts or access to tier sooner. Like I try to hold it off for as long as I can, because when those skills activate, they actually get less points for their strike rank, and getting their strike from A rank to S is a significant damage boost for them, and those skills activating can actually hurt it. Even adept extra hits are not going to count towards you know, strike rank, so that can be pretty annoying for them sometimes. But I think these pretty much the same as Ulki, so I'm going to try to find one. It should probably be in like B tier somewhere, I believe. There you go, there he is, in B-. That's fair enough. I like Janaf better, but slightly. I think they're pretty similar. They can both pretty much be used without any training in Part 4 too, which is super nice, because in Part 4 your army is pretty thin across the three armies. Talking is hard, but hopefully you heard what I meant. You have 3 different parts to populate with units, and you might not have enough units trained for all of them. So having these available to just fly over in the desert, or fly over swamps, or you know, be good in the Girl Mercenaries because their stats are pretty high too. They can double pretty much every enemy in Part 4, which is rare considering all the enemy sword masters that are around. So having these as like flexible units that can go anywhere is super nice. So the only reason they're in B- is like lacking in availability, and the Laguz gauge thing is pretty annoying, but not as bad as it's for Ranulf. Their gauge is a lot more manageable. It goes down a lot slower, which is super nice. Next we have Mia from Radiant Dawn, one of my favorite units in this game, because she's pretty customizable, but she's also pretty good. And you can either give him like almost no resources, and then she'll be alright, or you can give her some resources that almost no one else wants, and she'll be super good. The first thing I usually do when I get to the Girl Mercenaries is I take off Adept from Soren, give it to Mia, because Adept just gets so many more chances to activate when you have a unit that can actually double attack. And there's not that many units in the Girl Mercenaries that double early on. Titania certainly doesn't double. Har sometimes doubles, but if he doubles, he's usually tooth KOing. Same for Titania. Ike, same story, doesn't need more attack power. He just needs to double, period, and then he'll generally kill the enemy. Shinan, someone else who doubles, but sometimes doesn't kill, but would you rather have Adept on the unit with an enemy phase or one without? I would say having it with an enemy phase is much better. So that's why I give Adept to Mia. And the results pay off. She has a boosted crit rate, thanks to the Swordmaster class, later on True Blade. Also gets Astra at that point, which is just more chances to just kill anything she touches. Really huge avoid. I like supporting her with Ike. I think they give each other what they want. They have similar movements. Mia mostly just wants her own affinity and some Earth Avoid, which Ike can grant. And Ike wants the extra attack power sometimes. Not always, he also likes extra hit. But generally Ike just wants to have the Earth Affinity that he has by himself. He doesn't need more Avoid, he just needs more other things sometimes. But generally Ike is like fine with whatever he gets. So having Fire Earth between those two is nice. And they also have like similar movement and everything, so it works out well. And I like to forge a crit weapon for Mia sometimes. Not always. It's not always necessary, but it's nice. Just to have more shots at, you know, killing something she's not killing in 2 hits. Lets her kill something like an enemy general, even though she doesn't have the attack power to do it normally. But the extra chances of critting and adapting everything just solve it. Mia's growths are good in the areas that matter, mostly speed. She's always able to keep up with enemy speed, and she's able to cap speed and I believe skill in tier 2. I believe HP or res, one of those two as well, and that enables her to, you know, bonus experience abuse and get a bunch more strength that she has any right to having. At that point she starts like two-shotting things. I remember fighting with Mia in like part 4 and just two-shotting things with like a steel blade or something dumb like that, so she doesn't even always need to forge. So minimal investments, but pretty good payoff overall. One of the easier Girl Mercenaries to raise, and definitely much better than the D tier version that we got from Path of Radiance. I've always been a big fan of Radiant Dawn Mia. The one thing she doesn't have is like a mount or wings. Not many Girl Mercenaries have that. It's like Har and then Janaf Ulki and stuff. And the mount doesn't even always help. You have like Oscar and Titania, for example, but there are maps where they can't even do that much because they're inhabited by the terrain, like in the swamp map and the bridge with all the gaps and everything. So the lack of a mount is annoying in big maps with no terrain. Like 310 at the top of my head is kind of annoying for her because she can't really get as far as someone like Titania can. But there's also a lot of maps where you're fine with not having a mount. And I think I like the Desert Chapter, for example. She can be okay in that one, although I prefer sending her with Ike, of course, because she has the support with him. So I wouldn't put her very far up in the Radiant Dawn tier list, but I do think she's better than Radiant Dawn Zyhark overall. Despite the fact that Zyhark is an army with like overall worse units, I feel like Mia is just more serviceable, even though her colleagues are a little better. And it's not like the Grow Mercenaries are all just good units, right? You got like Hard, Titania, Ike, who are clearly better, but then Boyd and Shinon and, you know, Riz, Mist, like, those are kind of scrubs. So it's not like the Grow Mercenaries are like completely not in need for a good combat unit. We got Radiant Dawn Boyd here. I think she's better than Boyd for sure. I would also say she's overall more useful than the Hawks, but purely because of the availability. When they're both around, I think they're better. But I think Mia kind of edges out by who she is. So I'm gonna put her like around here somewhere. Not better than Minerva probably. Like better than Aloy, sure, I'll take that. B- seems good for her, which sounds a little low considering I just praised her so much. But you know, it's Radiant Dawn. It's kind of hard to stand out. I'm kind of liking her the way she is right now. But I could see things moving around right now. Then we have Mathis from Shadow Dragon. I'm laughing because he's bad. He's so bad. F. This is... oh, fuck, dude. Poor Mathis. So the most memorable thing I remember about Mathis is I was playing... or Donna was playing F11 0% growth. Shadow Dragon 0% growth. And he exposed Lena to 1 cav. And I was like, dude, watch out. Your Lena's gonna die. Well, we were watching a video, obviously. And then it was this Mathis. He was attacking Lena and he couldn't even one around her. Because... every one hard 5 Cavalier will just kill Lena straight up, but Mathis is like, alright, I'm gonna do like 10 HP damage or something. He's that bad. He's so bad statistically. Not that far behind the Cavaliers that you get in Chapter 1, I guess, but considering they had like 3.5 maps to grow by that point and time to build up weapon rank, Mathis is just awfully underwhelming. I don't think he has a single really good thing to his name. I think he's meant to be a scrub. I don't think he was ever meant to be good. I think his original version, like FE3, I think it might have been cut. Because they cut out the whole map, right? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe he was in a different map at that point. FE1, he's definitely still in there. He's just, I think, marginally better. But in Shadow Dragon, he just has nothing to his name. He's a Cavalier, which in other games can sometimes redeem you a little bit. Like, look at Ford, for example. It would be pretty mediocre if he wasn't a Cavalier, but he is. But Mathis, like, everyone else can reclass into Cavalier. You can have, like, Navarre if you want to reclass into Cavalier. You just have a better version of him. Because Navarre, for example, has that C rank in swords, whereas Mathis, I believe, just has the generic E swords, D lances, or something dumb like that. So yeah, not a very good unit, I'm afraid. Can't really say much about him. Probably a little bit better than Roshi, just on account of being around a little bit earlier, but that's really about it for as far as I'm concerned. No real utility from Mathis. Doesn't mean you can't make him good, especially in lower difficulties. But out of all these units, I feel like he's the one with some of the least utility that we have on this list. Not quite F tier, but you know, pretty far down here. Then we have Minerva from the same game, and I like Shadow Dragon Minerva quite a lot. She doesn't get talked about too much, but I kind of like the revamp that they did between like FE3 and FE11. They made Minerva like axe focused, gave her like the hot clear and stuff like that. It's pretty cool, kind of like that. Just a really strong unit in general. Doesn't really double very much as far as I know, kind of similar stats to the FE12 version. But the hot clear just hits so hard, and you can use it as a vulnerary, as an added bonus. Or is the elixir one? I know the Parthi has pure water. I never really used the weapons like that, but it's kind of like a small thing that I sometimes notice Don not use. But Hot Claire, basically her personal weapon for quite a while, because there's almost no good axe users in Shadow Dragon that want to use it for a while. Even if you have a dedicated axe user like Barst, chances are he hasn't reached A rank axes yet, because Shadow Dragon weapon ranks is built so slowly, just 2 per battle, regardless of doubling or killing. So she's gonna have access to the Hot Claire for quite a while. You can reclass her to Paladin if you want to avoid arrow weakness, but I generally just find that having her hold on to the axes and the Draken Rider rank is much better. She's not going to be as strong as like a completely trained, I don't know, Abel or something as a Draken Knight. I think like if you were to compare her base level to like a 20 promoted Abel, like you raise him to level 20 and promote him, Abel's going to be better, for example, even as a Draken Knight, despite the lack of like axe rank. But for how little you have to put in, and like the lack of a Master Seal, which I think is a pretty big deal, because by the time Minerva joins, you have like one Master Seal and that's it. And that's the one you get from her joining chapter, from like the hero in here herself. That's the first Master Seal you get. So having a promoted unit by that point is super nice. It's the same reason why Wendell and Jagan, for example, are so wonderful sometimes, is having access to promoted classes and promoted utility, but not needing to spend a Master Seal. She can also go like Sniper or Swordmaster if you wanted to for a little bit, although I think she's specialized in axes for a reason, and you're better off reclassing other people to that. But I like this version of Minerva quite a lot. We had our FE12 version here. I think the FE12 one is a little better, maybe, but not by too much. Maybe the Shadow Dragon one is better. I'm having a hard time deciding. If you want FE12, the axe utility is still there. It's even better because even less people use axes in that game. and less good people, I should say. And you get a lot of using like the dragon pikes and stuff in FE12. So maybe the FE11 one is like less wonderful. I don't think the FE11 one can use horse slayers at base level, like the Rider's Bane. You might need like an arm scroll for that. I think the first one you get is chapter 12. So that's like an unfortunate part of effectiveness damage achievements. You can still like hammer people, which is super nice. But overall, I would say I would give the edge a little bit to the FE12 one, but I might be wrong on that one. I'm okay with this sort of, but I know it looks weird. I think it makes sense to compare them, and like since their stats are basically the same, and most of the rules in these games are the same, I think it makes sense that they end up in the same tier. Even though FE like 12 and 11 are still different games, especially when it comes to like enemy composition. Someone like Sida, for example, I think has a much bigger gap between her FE11 and FE12 counterparts. Where like FE11 Sida is like easy top tier, for example. But the FE12 version isn't nearly as good because there's not as many enemies to wing spear. Then we have Luke from FE12. Now I've actually been playing some FE12 higher difficulties recently. First Lunatic, and then when I realized that was quite a slog, I went down to restarting on Maniac for a little bit just to try out things. And people always praise Luke. I always see screenshots of other people playing like FE12 late game, and they're almost always using Luke as, you know, just a growth unit, just training him up all the way, using him all game long, reclassing him into like many different things. I don't know, Swordmaster, Paladin, Wyvern, Sniper, I don't know, what have you. And everyone's like, that is a really good unit. And every time I play the prologue, I'm just reminded that Luke doesn't start off very good. Like, he's just completely outclassed by better units like Chris, but you don't have many other better units like that. But you do get like Athena and Ogma and Kane. All those units I feel are just a little bit better than Luke when he's around. But one thing I do like about Luke that's like weird is I always find myself finishing off enemies with Luke because he's just not as good at taking on like enemy phase counters or like enemy counters than like they are. So it makes sense to finish off enemies with Luke. And as a result, because it technically makes sense to finish off enemies with him, I find that it's not that hard to give him levels. Like every time I just have like a random thief sitting around that needs to be finished off, I'm like, alright, another kill for Luke, easy. And it's not because I want to favor Luke or anything, it's just because it makes sense to do even in these high difficulties, and that kind of works to his advantage. He's definitely better than Rhodey, just all around better, by quite a bit. A couple points of differences they have, they make quite a big difference overall. And I believe he has the better weapon ranks overall. I don't remember exactly which one of them has like D swords, E lances, and the other way around, but whatever he has, it works out for him quite well. You do get to deal weapons in the prologue, so that can boost his power a little bit. Luke is alright. He's gonna get two shot by like fighters and stuff, sure, because it's Lunatic. But on lower difficulties, he can hold his own just fine, even in the prologue. And I do believe that once he gets trained and he gets like quite a few levels on his belt, he can function just fine, even in a like super harsh climate like FE12 Lunatic. I'm pretty happy with him as a growth unit. He's not as broken as like Chris and Pala and Katria and all those other like monsters that you have in that game, but he's still super good. Just like one of the more average units in the game in the way that like he's kind of the performance you would expect from other games. He's like just a normal growth unit. You can train, you kind of have to put effort in, but not so much that it becomes overwhelming, and he's around for a lot of the time, but in a more harsh climate, but he still holds up. So I think better than Noah and Zealot, I guess. Like a B+, C, B- kind of unit. Kind of holds up well. Kind of keep putting people here. Like I have like all three Minervas here, for example. I would say he's better than FE12 Minerva for sure. So maybe like the bottom of B+ is like an okay place for him. He seems alright. Not a must-use unit, but one of the easier units to use in FE12 for sure, if you want to train someone. Seems pretty cool. Next up, we have Caesar himself, aka Steel Sword, and God, FE12 units really blend together in this game. God damn. Okay, so in this game he joins with C swords instead of the D swords that he had at Shadow Dragon, I believe, and that's an improvement, I guess. FE12 it also helps when you're male that you can reclass it to literally any male class there is, whereas in Shadow Dragon they were separated by 2 sets, so that gives him a lot of flexibility, but it also means that everyone else can do the same thing. So on one hand it's nice that he can now become a Draco Knight, but on the other hand literally every other person can do it, and so we kind of got to look at what makes him stand out, and it really is just C swords. Now if you're going to work with swords in a DS remake of FE1 or FE3, then I guess at least he's in FE3 Book 2 remake, where things like the Worm Slayer and the Armor Slayer are more relevant than they are in Shadow Dragon, so that's okay, but not a whole lot to his name. He's barely better than someone like Samto, who joins, I believe, like 1 map earlier, basically. Yeah, I mean, he joins at the start of 7, if you leave him alive in 6x, and Santo joins at the end of 6, so kind of like the same availability almost, considering how short 6x is. 6x, yeah, that's what we call it now. That sounds a lot like something else, but here we go. So I'm trying not to hold back on the analysis, but there really isn't too much else to say. His bases are not that great, but not unusably bad. I mean, it'd be a challenge to use him on Lunatic, but I think on normal and hard mode, he'd be behind a bit your main crew, but he's not like unsalvageable, just kind of like it's a really big pain to work with a character like this on Lunatic or Lunatic Reverse, but below that he'd probably do okay. Just kind of like carry on in a way where it's like you could train him if you want to, but it's not really worth it, and the payoff isn't as good. Like carry on, at least his stats stand out a little bit. He's more like Hicks in that way, so I'm gonna put him like in that solid like D-ish tier. At least he has like decent availability for all game long, but FE12 is so bloated with units that he just doesn't stand out at all. And then we have Nina, only playable in New Mystery, not in Shadow Dragon. I think it's kind of cool that they made her playable, even if it's only for basically 1 or 2 turns. And from all the 4 princesses that you get at the end, she's one of the better ones because she has A-rank staves, and she has the capability to use the Arm Staff, which I don't remember if it was her or if I used another princess to do it, but she can revive someone with the Arm Staff, which is pretty neat. And that's kind of all her utility though, other than like being able to use Rescue. I mean, being able to use Rescue by itself isn't anything special because it's an E-rank staff, but the position that she's in the final map is so good that it lets your auto units get there where they want to be without using a warp, so that's kind of nice. But it's only 1 turn, like it's literally 1, maybe 2 turns of utility if she doesn't die in the meanwhile, which she has a pretty good chance of doing considering how many dragons there are around. So the turn you recruit her is probably the turn you win anyway. So without spoiling too much more about the final battle of FE12, I think everyone gets what I'm getting at in this thing. I don't think I've tiered any of the other bishops in this one. I think I had all these in the Goto tier list for some reason, but yeah, I think she just doesn't have enough availability to really do anything in the game. So what she provides is decent. It's just how do we rate 1 turn of utility? Pretty good utility, but still 1 turn. I'm gonna plop her like around here somewhere. She's like a liability. Not really. She's never a liability. She's just never around. She's like no utility, no brownie points for her. Basically, is what I'm saying. So yeah, bottom of D, I guess. I recommend you use her when you get her for the 1 turn she's there. I will say that much. Cecil, I have some not so fond memories of trying to use Cecil sometimes, mostly in like Lunatic, where she actually gets one-shot by Chapter 1 enemies, and it's pretty hard to rectify that without some kind of obscure reclass. I'm pretty sure as a Cavalier, which is her most bulky class unpromoted, she gets one-shot by the Barbarians in Chapter 1 Lunatic. That's pretty bad. Prologue, she doesn't stand out a whole lot. She brings a bunch of steel weapons to the fray, but she herself isn't a great user of them or anything. But she can fight in the Prologue if you want to. She's just never one of your best units there, so I always tend to like not field her in favor of other units. So I've never really had much experience with using her, even when she's like one of the few units you have, because even within that like small group of units, there's not that many reasons to field her. I've seen Orisa use her in a draft once, where she was actually pretty decent. I mean, sure, anyone can become decent at a game, because at least in FE12 everyone has good growths, so eventually Cecil became good, I guess. And the other thing that she's kind of good for is having access to Pegasus Knights as an unpromoted unit. Mills might have access to like every single class ever when they're promoting, but once they're unpromoted, they don't actually have access to a flyer class. They need to promote to get Draco Knight. So it's nice to have a Pegasus Knight Cecil, not because she fights particularly well, but because you can manipulate the eye a little bit, like make enemies move in certain directions, because they like going for Cecil because they can one-shot her, so that lets you manipulate them a little bit and maybe make things easier for your other units. So that's like decent utility, and she's salvageable, but not super good. I think she's better than Caesar, and it about like ends there basically. Yeah, I'm gonna put her around here somewhere. Worse than Mekkah seems a little harsh maybe, but Mekkah's stats at least are pretty good when he joins, and he's around for more than 1 chapter. So there's not actually that much of a difference between them right now. We don't have many FE12 units on the list to compare them to, but I'm pretty comfortable that they're in the lower regions at least. But FE12, not the game I have the most experience with. Getting more and more as I play Lunatic or Maniac every now and then, but it's still so hard to evaluate units in that game. Even though it's a pretty straightforward mechanical game, unlike the Fates games, for example, where skills and everything determine a lot more. But yeah, there we go. D tier for Mr., Mrs., Cecil, and Caesar, of course. Now we get to Echoes. Now that's a game I have recent experience with. There's a lot of Echo submissions today. So the first one is Matilda, joining in Act 3, so kind of like rough availability, but not so little that you have like nothing off it. There's still plenty of the game left for Matilda to contribute. The point I'm at in the Let's Play right now, I'm playing Celica's route part 4, so I haven't done a whole lot with the late Act 3 characters from Alm's route, like Matilda and like Delthea, for example. But I've used Matilda a fair bit in Act 3 when I had her, and I was pretty satisfied. Being able to use the Rider's Bane on its own is just a huge boon in Alm's route, because there's so many enemy Cavaliers and Paladins that you gotta kill, and she has enough speed to double them at base level. She doesn't need investment to do it like Clive does. I still insist that Clive is better at that point if you can get him to double, which for me only took one speed shrine, one speed fountain, and at base, with promotion and speed fountain, he already doubled like the generic Cavaliers, not the Paladins, but like the Cavaliers in that route, which I thought was pretty good. And Clive's added bulk really helps, but that doesn't mean Matilda is bad. Like, they're both pretty good at that point. I know my Clive was like RNG blessed, so I guess it's worth noting that Matilda can do that stuff at base as well. I think Matilda, I think her level is a little low. I think by the time you arrive there, it actually takes quite a bit of work to get her to Gold Knight. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get both Clive and Matilda to Gold Knight by the time I'm like far enough into Act 4 where I think it's worth it. I'm going to try for sure. I definitely think Matilda's good, but I remember even when playing the original Gaiden, and I remember even when playing Echoes for the first time, it was pretty hard to actually get him to promotion. I don't know what it was. I didn't really grind very much even in the original runs, and now I can't grind because of Loot Streak. So I don't know how hard it will be to get her to Gold Knight. Because at this point, for example, I think Grey is either closing in or already a Dreadfighter, for instance. So I think she's a little bit on the level, but not that much. So overall, I think she's pretty good. Not as durable as I'd like sometimes, but her class and the ability to use the Rider's Bane, I think, is like a solid B- at the very least. I think she's worse than like the Villager here, Villager Boy Cliff, and probably worse than Leon as well, considering like Hunter's Volley and how good it is, how good Bow Knight is in general. I think these are more solid units with more availability as well. But I wouldn't mind having her in the same tier, so I'm going to put her like above Imelda and Luke and Parn, I guess. That seems about fair for her. I think she's good. Maybe a little overrated, but I don't know what people think nowadays of Matilda. I know she's pretty good. This is not a low tier by any means. It's just, I don't think she belongs in like an... I could see maybe A-, but not A+ or the S tier, for sure. Then there's Celica herself, of course. A couple episodes back, we had someone request Gaiden Celica. I don't remember where I would have put her. I didn't have a graphic for her to figure out exactly where she would go. I thought she was decent, not spectacular. It really depends on the map and the time and place where Celica, how good she is. Like, when she joins, there's only like 4 units you have in total, so she kind of contributes well by default because there's no alternatives. So you kind of gotta use her to go as fast as possible and do as well as possible. If she picks up Seraphim, then she's really good against certain enemies, like certain monsters, dragons, etc. I remember being in trouble against a pair of Fiends, for example, late in part 4, and Celica just comes on through, one-rounds them with Seraphim, no problem. Almost no other unit could do it either, so that's a pretty good boon to have in your army. Her movement, like her low movement, is a bit of a problem, especially in the swamp maps. Sure, most of the armor is suffering from that, but it kind of hurts in Celica's case. The only thing that kind of makes up for it is the Majoring, which gives her, I think, 5 range with Thunder, because it gives +2 range, and 4 range with everything else. I kind of wish she had the 5 range that she gets in the original Gaiden. And in that game, it just defaults all your magic to 5 range, I believe. This game is just +2 range, which is still pretty good. And you can trade it around a lot, so Celica can definitely get in the action a lot more once you get the Majoring, which is super nice. Where does that put her? I'm gonna say like a B something tier. I'm trying to see where I put Alm again. I think he's in the A tier for some reason. Maybe put him down to B somewhere. A+ apparently is where he's at, I think. I remember him being... Yeah, there he is. Here's Alm. So who else is from SOV? Lucas. I think he's worse than Lucas for sure. Maybe like a tier worse than Lucas, actually. I do think Alm significantly better. I haven't gotten to the good part of Alm yet, where he really starts to shine in Act 4. So I don't really want to put her above Alm. I think in Act 4, Celica's definitely weaker than Alm, and before that... I think in Act 1 and 2, they're sort of even, maybe. And then Act 3, it's like, Alm feels a bit worse, but Celica isn't spectacular either, just like a little bit better, maybe. So I think like a tier below Alm wouldn't be the worst thing ever. She worse than the 3 house units? I would say so, probably. Trying to see if there's anyone else to compare her to. I don't see any other SOV around here, so I can probably put her wherever I want and get away with it. Definitely worse than Juan, Cormac. Yeah, these guys are all like really good. They're just like very unavailable sometimes. I would say somewhere below Nana, below Barst. Yeah. You know, considering I actually don't think she belongs here. Maybe I don't think she's good enough for this one. Maybe she's. All these units feel like a lot better than Celica overall for me in SOV. Like on the whole, she has some nice utility, but she's not great. So I'm actually gonna put her like below Leon. I think that feels better to me. Yeah, maybe around Matilda's level is more like her. Maybe I'm underrating her a little bit, but I haven't found her that good. She's got some durability issues and everything, and that means she's never really like a front line you want to expose a lot. She also uses swords on enemy phase instead of tomes, which limits her countering. Actually, no, she counters on enemy phase. I think that she's attacked by a weapon, but the problem with her is that she counters with fire instead of, you know, something good, which can sometimes be a little bit annoying. Let me know though. Let me know. Always open to feedback. Then we have Dean. I remember the first time I tiered Dean on like the archetype tier list, I actually tiered Atlas instead with his face. I just didn't know what he looked like anymore. It had been so long. Pretty sure this is Dean though. This playthrough I recruited Sonia, who we're getting into later. So no recent experience with Dean, but I did recruit him on my first playthrough, and I used him in Gaiden as well. And I mean, Dread Fighter is Dread Fighter, and he's pretty close to it. The Brave Sword I'm not going to count in his favor, not because he can't use it, because of course he can, but you get it regardless of whether you recruit him or not. So it's not fair to say the Brave Sword is better than whatever shield Sonia joins with, so pick Dean, because he drops the Brave Sword when you kill him, and he's not that difficult to kill. It was pretty luck-based though. He's got a lot of crit and a lot of strength, so it was actually pretty tough to, you know, get to him, but it was pretty fun to play his map. I think overall Sonia's map is easier. I know witches are weird. They can teleport, but generally they don't really kill your units. They are kind of programmed to... they're kind of manipulatable, and even if they're like totally random, they still tend to not kill your units. You can always undeploy people in SOV too to make sure they don't kill Valbar or something. I don't think our map is particularly hard, and it's a good experience for Javelin Catria with like a res fountain and everything. So I don't think necessarily that going one way or the other is so much worse that you're going to tier the unit like a lot lower or higher. Dean's map though, it was a little tricky, but it wasn't too bad. And I like that everything only had one range, so you could like a bunch of free pot shots in. I think Dean is like really good. It's just like kind of unavailable, so somewhere around like the level of like Imelda, Pent, Matilda. Well, maybe not Pent. Pent is like a little too good probably. A minus, B plus. I'm feeling B plus more than anything. I'm trying to see if there's any other SOV here. I think Cliff has more utility overall. I think Leon has more utility overall. I'm gonna put him like around above Alec and Noish. For like once he joins and you get him to Dread Fighter, he's obviously like super good. I'm trying to imagine what the X4 maps would have been like if I had an extra Dread Fighter instead of Sonia, and I'm pretty much liking what I'm thinking. I'm not regretting my choice. Don't get me wrong. Red Tricorn, Sonia forever. But Dean is pretty nice. Would have been pretty nice to have as an extra Dread Fighter. I think in the original guide, it took me a little bit to get him to Dread Fighter. I know he joins a couple levels below. But you still gotta get him there somehow, and XP gain isn't that fast, so it's not like you get a free Dread Fighter forever. He does need to get out of Myrmidon first, but it's not that hard. His base combat is pretty goddamn good. Next we have Bowie, and I never really thought much of Bowie, and I still realistically don't think he's super good, but using him was a lot of fun in Echoes. It just kind of started by giving him a speed shrine for no real reason. A speed fountain, I mean, I keep calling them shrines, I don't know why. But I gave him like 1 or 2 speed fountains, and he got like really good level ups for some reason, particularly in strength or magic and speed. And before I knew it, I was like on my way to promoting him, and I'd never really promoted the Sage on Celica's route before, and it was super fun. I can't say I'm super excited about him in part 4, mostly because it's hard to get into the action. They really needed more than 4 move, and not having swamps would have helped as well. It does really help that he can trade around the Mage Ring or the Grimoire Ring for more magic power. And that gives him some options, but 4 move is 4 move, and I find myself not really getting much use out of like Recover, for example, as much as I would have thought I would have, and it's just really hard to get into the action and really get him to do anything. But before that, he had some solid utility. May brags that she has like Hurdy Lightning or whatever, but Bowie picks that up pretty quickly anyway, so that's not a huge advantage that May has over Bowie. I think overall May is better than, I think overall Bowie is better than May, so I'm gonna put him like around here for now. And the reason that is because May promotes later than him. Her promotion level is just higher for some reason. It's very unfair, but I do think Bowie's better. I think other than that, they are very similar, and you could honestly use either of them pretty interchangeably in like Act 2, Act 3. But when Bowie promotes, I think that makes him shine a little bit more than May. His promotion was a little disappointing for me overall in utility, but not having it is even worse. Is even so much worse. I really wish that she got a sooner promotion. I don't know why they didn't fix that in SOV. It's like sometimes these things, they're just like too loyal of a remake sometimes. They could have fixed more things about Gaiden in SOV, I think. But oh well, other than that, I think they're like super similar. Their bases aren't too far apart. Neither of them double reliably at first. They need some help from Speech Fountain, there we go. And if you give it to them, they can double for a little bit, and that can be worth it. You can also save the Speed Fountains for Pala, though, which is also a good option. So I kind of wish I did that sometimes when I look at my Pala and she's getting doubled by like Dread Fighters every now and then, or some other random enemy, but hey, what can you do, man? Then we have Pala, speaking of her, from Shadows of Valentia still. I don't remember if I've tiered Katria already, but Pala has been super nice for me, obviously. She joins early in Act 3, and she's probably your best unit for all of Katria's campaign, really. Right now, Katria is surpassing her because of her better growths, and particularly in strength and speed. Katria has proven more useful overall, but I've not forgotten how useful Pala was, and how useful she can be if you make her even better. Now, what I did with Pala was something that Rengo recommended to me in his guide. We did like the Super Pala strat, which involves getting her promoted as soon as possible in Act 3. What you do is you save the Sea Shrine with the Necro Dragon until later. You pass it by in Act 2, and later on you go back to get it once you've got Atlas and the Pegasus Knights. And you go there and use it to get Pala promoted, because you have like a golden apple to give her a level, and then you can give her a couple of XP fountains, and you need to give her like 1 level up in the meantime. So it's like a lot of investment, but it does mean you have a Falconite Pala for most of Act 3, and that makes everything like the Desert Forts and as well as what's that, Greeth's Fortress, and levels like that are just so much easier when we have a promoted Pala around. The boosted damage against monsters and just the extra movement, the extra flexibility, durability, everything. It makes it so much better. She's basically like a flying Jagan at that point, and that's super helpful in like all these Celica maps where your movement is always being inhibited some way. And even if you don't do this by Act 4, she will be a Falcon Knight and have most of the same utility that mine has right now, which is probably going to be worse combat than Katria, but still going to be better than most of your army just by virtue of being around and being able to kill things. Being weak to bows, it kind of sucks sometimes, especially once enemies start carrying actual bows that have might and thus are effective against her. But most of the time she's able to, withstand a couple hits. I'm getting a surprising amount of uses out of the triangle attack too. I know it's stupid, but it's just sometimes it just works out that way. I mostly use it to set up kills for Est, because why not? But Pala kind of get utility out of it sometimes too. I think Pala is an S tier unit in SOV too. I'm not gonna lie, I'm sometimes a little underwhelmed by her performance right now in Act 4. I see it. She's here. I'm gonna put her above Katria, I think, but I think it's close. I'm gonna put them next to each other. I think it's very close between them right now, but it's mostly because recency bias. I know Pala used to be much stronger than Katria. My Katria, I sandbagged her a little bit in Act 3. I didn't give her as much XP as I should have. Maybe we should have traded her to Warp Staff more often than I did. Then she would have been promoted before Act 4, I think. I think I promoted her like very late into Act 3 when I could have done it a little earlier. So that might have been my mistake. But overall, I think these two are very similar and definitely S+ tier units. Like, they're so much more mobile than everyone else in the desert and the swamp maps. It's really unfair. And Pala's Jaganist utility is absolutely marvelous in Act 3. I can't even imagine how bad the Desert Fort would have been had it not had Pala around. Then there is Forsyth, so you all better stand aside. Forsyth is enthusiastic, and that's good, but then he's not very good at doing things, so I kind of prefer if he just tone it down a little bit and just chill on the sidelines, maybe on the bench sometimes. I just don't like this class in Shadows of Valentia or the original Gaiden. I'm tiering according to Shadows of Valentia, but Armor Knight is just not that good in SOV, and in SOV, the fun thing is you can grind anyone to be good, and it doesn't even hurt that much. You can probably still get Blitzkrieg with the Baron Forsyth in your army if you really want to. But the problem with Forsyth and his group, like Python as well, Clive is better off, but he's just so unleveled. It's like, gonna get him to like that first promotion when Lucas has already been there for ages and has been 90ing it up is just, it feels bad. It feels a little bad. I'm not sure how tanky he gets when you do promote him to Knight. I know Lucas started like pinging things, and he's got a heavy armor skill that lets him take like less damage from archers and stuff. That could make Forsyth a little better. I just wish they could counter archers while they're doing that instead of just tanking them, not doing much in return. And I think the reason that Lucas actually works so well for people is that his stats are also just like very, very good, and he's a lot of ability, and he's around when Warp is around and everything. Well, I mean, Forsyth joins roughly when you'll get Warp, so that's not very fair to say. But my point is, Lucas is good despite his class, whereas Forsyth has issues, and on top of that, he's in one of the worst classes that doesn't really get much. He does have the ability to use the Writer's Bane in Act 3, which I guess you should credit him for. I mean, I gave credit for it to, like, Claire and, who else? Clive and Matilda. So, but I don't think he's nearly as good. He doesn't have the movement that they have. He doesn't have the flexibility that they have. He probably does have more durability, I guess, but it doesn't really make him great or anything. If he can solo like entire groups of enemies like Lucas can, then he might be good enough for Act 3, but the fact that you have to train him a lot more is annoying. Lucas is like an A- tier, I think, or B-. Remember, I had him around here somewhere. Let me just park you right here for a moment. I'm not going to put him in B+, don't worry. I'm trying to find Lucas real quick, just to see where his relative position is. I don't want to accidentally put him above Lucas. Oh, he's an A+, alright. I think he's a fair amount below that. I think he's worse than Celica. I think he's worse than Alm for sure. I'm going to put him in the CD tier, I think. He's definitely not that good. Probably not terrible. Just not very good. I think most people put him like very far down. I'm actually like wondering if it's possible to make him viable without too much work. Yeah, I'm gonna put him like at a lower C for now. But you know, I might be proven wrong later on. I want to put him in D. Like, is he really a tier above Defdon and like Dunvet and Largo? Probably not. I do like Writer's Bane utility. That's the thing. Yeah, I think he's worse than Est actually. I've grown to like SOV Est, so maybe Est should just move up. A lot of people have been saying that. I'll put him above Gordon for now. Yeah, so that's like a million tiers below Lucas, I guess. And then last on the Shadows of Valentia part, we have Sonia. And I thought I was gonna try to use Sonia, and I've been trying, but 4 move is 4 move. And joining this on a level is really annoying. I've seen people say she's the worst unit in SOV, or the worst unit in Gaiden at least. I don't know about SOV. It's so annoying to train a unit like this in a Blitzkrieg playthrough, or a playthrough where you want to go fast at least. 4 move, at that point in the game, so far from promotion, like being a female unit doesn't help either. I really sandbagged May for that, and I'm going to just do the same for Sonia. It really messes with your potential if you can promote, and you're just kind of stuck on promoted. I guess what isn't helping, I'm giving her the tricorn hat all the time because it looks good on her, and that means she's not holding a ring, but I do trade her the mage ring when I can, and it still doesn't help very much. I will say Sonia's spell list is one of the coolest I've ever seen, and I really want to try it out. If I can't get it to work in the Echo's main game, then I'm going to try to make it work in a post game at least. I have vague plans to play it, just have to kind of figure out how to go from there, because, geez. I want to use like spells like Entrap and stuff. That seems like so much stuff, and like I think she gets Rewarp as well. That just seems so much fun. I can't wait to try that out, but gotta get there first, and that's the hard part. I think she is a solid D tier unit for sure. Maybe E tier, but I don't want to, you know, I like her too much. I think she's worse than Forsyth though. So how about we put her like around here somewhere? She's not very good, but she's got good taste in hats, and that's what counts. Excalibur is also like a really cool and useful spell. I'm glad she has that at base. If she didn't have that, boy, she'd be much more annoying to use. At least she has like, you have like these indoor maps, for example, where you get -20 hit for no reason because floor tiles, but she just ignores that kind of stuff. So using magic sometimes is nice, but it also makes her so frail. She just loses HP every attack, and that makes it hard to do the front line with her because almost every enemy hits on physical defense. Some of them even double her. I think she can like get one-rounded by gargoyles. I haven't tried because I don't expose them to her. But yeah, yikes. And then we only have a couple of 3 houses units here actually. I think Cyril disappeared again. I don't know where he ran, but I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to tier him, so let me just double check that real quick. There they are. Apparently both Shamir and Cyril ran off to do practice. I guess they were getting impatient. I was pretty sure I had more than 2-3 houses units submitted. Apologies if you submitted those and you were scared. I've been recording these in different sessions, so I have some more energy when I'm recording them. And apparently they don't save properly. I wonder if that's because I'm making a tier list that's like way too big for this. This is not how you're supposed to use this tool. I'm wondering if it's actually eventually gonna break. But before it has a chance to, let's tier these units, alright? So Kaspar, I think he's known from the start as like one of the worst Black Eagles units to start with, because of his low defenses combined with his kind of offense, low speed particularly. A lot of units get doubled on maddening mode especially, but he definitely gets doubled more often than not. It's harder to get him out of it. I like his personal skill though. It's like, I think it's like -10 avoid for enemies he's close to. It fits his personality, but it also just works like a Heartseeker kind of thing, where you just hit enemies because Kaspar is next to you, and God knows we need more hit rate on maddening. I actually don't think Kaspar is that terrible early on, if you want him to be, and in the long term I think he can be good. But there's no denying that his bases are pretty much worse than most of the Black Eagles. I also don't like that it's like kind of difficult to recruit him out of house, I think. Because you cannot get more than a C support in him, like pre-time skip, unless you use New Game Plus. So you actually gotta work with your weapon ranks a little bit. I always find it a little bit annoying with Kaspar, so I never really recruit him out of house. There's a lot of units I like recruiting out of house, like Felix and Leone and Bernadetta and stuff. But Kaspar is one I just never do for that reason. It's just too annoying. So I think most people would like him to focus on gauntlets, and then either make him a grappler and make use of that. I always confuse the arts, but there's like the grappler art. That's pretty good. That really helps him. I tiered him a while ago in the fighter tier list, actually, I think. But yeah, the grappler art is pretty good. I want to say it's 1-2 punch, but I think it's the other one. I'm confusing it with the other one. But that one's pretty good. You can also make him a War Master. I think that most people that praise Kaspar are like, I don't know why everyone calls him bad. I made mine a War Master and he became super good. That's because of quick riposte and War Master stats are just like really good. It's a really good class. It doesn't really mean that Kaspar is good. Like if anyone can get to War Master, then they're going to be fine in the end game. The problem is his start is very good. But near the end, he's going to have like 1,000,000 crits and 1,000,000 damage, fist fair and everything. So that's, and quick riposte is just a really broken skill. But for the most part, I think he's a good portion below the main 3 houses body of units. I think they're like A- somewhere, B+ maybe. Where the squad I get in? Where's the 3 houses squad? They're an A- here. I think he's worse than them by a good amount. Like a C tier unit. I don't think he's unusable. Not unusable, but like either a low C or a high D I think is appropriate for him. I think within the context of 3 houses, he actually looks like a lot worse than that. Because he really stands out as a worse unit compared to them. But in the context of this tier list, I'm not sure if he's like bad enough to be all the way down here. I think he's better than Ash, for instance. Like a reasonable amount. Maybe not an entire tier though. So I'm going to put him on top of D tier for now. Maybe below Sylphina and Needletube for now is what my gut is saying. Again, let me know if you disagree. Yes, I know Kaspar gets good in the end, but his bases are pretty trash. Then we have Linwarp, Linhart, but Warp is basically his main utility, the main reason to recruit him, and the main reason to use him as far as I'm concerned, both in-house and out-of-house. It's his main draw. Healing utility and physical utility are both pretty nice, of course, and that's one of the reasons to use him in Black Eagles. But if you're recruiting him from out-of-house, it's probably because of Warp. And he doesn't really do anything else particularly well. There's no real masterclass that he fits in well. You don't really want to make him like a Holy Knight or Dark Knight or anything. It's just kind of like a waste of tutoring, I think, to go there. I think what you want him to be is just a bishop, just promoted to bishop. Have 2 warp uses, have double physic and double heal and everything else you want. And that's pretty much all he needs to do. He can be offensively kind of strong. I remember him getting like, I think he gets like Excalibur at some point or some kind of wind spells, but I don't remember because most of the time I just use him to heal and warp and he's pretty good at it. I think Linhart is one of the better 3 houses units overall for this sheer utility, and there's like not a whole lot of controversy on like with regards to what he should be, but I think the main controversy is like how useful is Warp. Of course, if you're using an LTC or even like a speedrun, then Warp can be majorly useful. If you're just playing casually, I think of Warp as like a huge mobility boost for a lot of units. I think for instance like the Scythia, that's good enough to still be like a really good unit. The difference between like the Scythia and Linhart for me is mostly that like the Scythia has such good magic powers and spell lists that she's also offensively capable, whereas Linhart doesn't really one-shot enemies very much, so it's really just a warp utility, kind of like Manuela. So I think he goes below Lysithea for sure. I got Lysithea on like A- right now. I do think he fits in with the rest of the cast still. If anything, I think Lysithea should move up rather than Linhart down. I think Linhart is more useful than these guys over here. I just think Warp is good enough. So I think I'm going to move Lysithea up a tier with the rest of the Warp squad. A couple people have been suggesting that, so I'm going to move him like this a little bit. Like this, I reckon. And that way we're emphasizing how good Warp is while moving Lysithea above the rest of the 3 houses units. Rengar made like a cool 3 houses tier list a while ago that I kind of influenced my thought process a little bit. Not like copy pasting his thoughts or anything, but having discussions with him kind of makes me change my mind on characters, certainly. Then there's Shamir, and I think from my first playthrough I realized that Shamir was, if not broken, then at least a very, very good unit. In my first playthrough, which for the record was when I was completely unknowledgeable about three houses in general and didn't know what I was doing, but I thought Shamir's personal was pretty cool, usable with dancing, and just pretty useful when you have to like fight on enemy phase. Like you just kill an enemy and then you get +4 in like a lot of important stats like strength, speed, skill, I think it is. And then you just explode on enemy phase, you have close counter activated, and you just hit everything at 1-3 range. Everything that wants to attack you just dies. Pretty good. And if you dance her, she also gets the bonus from that. If you give her special dance, that also boosts her stats a little bit. So she can be pretty good at enemy phase, which is weird for a sniper. But nowadays, I think most people remember Shamir from just Hunter's Volley. Just doubling on player phase, on manning mode for free, on counter generally if the enemy even survives, with pretty good accuracy, access to hit +20 easily if you just master Archer, access to darting blow if you wanted to have it, although Hunter's Volley kind of negates the need for it. She can be on a Pegasus, but most of the time I think you just want her to spam Hunter's Volley. And the fact that she doesn't have to even qualify as a sniper, but she just joins as one, which means she can just build into it pretty quickly, makes her so strong in three houses. I think she's better than most of the units in it. Her main drawback compared to the other three houses squad, I might as well just move her like around that area, right? I think her main drawback compared to them is not being able to join in some of the battles. Of course, she doesn't join until around chapter 6 if you recruit her ASAP. I think chapter 6 is like the reasonable early. I would recommend chapter 5 Catherine for most people, but I don't think you can get Shamir by chapter 5. But I think if you really want Shamir, you want her by chapter 6. And at that point, she's going to be better than any bow user you have for sure. I would say she's better than these units. These units are like good, but not spectacular. I would say Shamir is like a solid tier above them actually, because like her utility lasts for the entire game, unlike Soth. But then she also has a really good combat art in Hunter's Volley and just really good utility in general. Most of these units are capable of being good snipers as well, especially someone like Felix or Petra. You probably wouldn't make Petra a sniper, but she could be. But I think Shamir is really a class on her own. I'm not sure she should go above Celica or not. But I do think she's really good. I think she's like, at the very least, an A+. Ranger actually put her in like S tier, which I thought was a little surprising, but it made sense to me because she's just that solid. But personally, I'm going to leave her like around here for now until someone convinces me otherwise. And last but not least, we have Cyril, and a lot of people shit on Cyril for having shitty bases, and you know, me being Mekkah, I should probably do the same. But I think in three houses especially, it's important to look at factors outside of bases. And even though his personal skill basically says, hey, I'm a growth unit, train me, I think Cyril is just really capable based on his boons and his personal, his learned arts especially. He gets point blank volley really quickly. He gets vengeance at some point, which is one of the reasons I like Bernadetta a lot, and I like the do quite a bit too. So those combined just make him kill just about anything you want, really. You can also get Hunter's Volley, I guess, but I think most people would just train Cyril to be on a Wyvern and just go that route. And he has like the perfect Banes and Boons for that. I think he's like good at lances and flying and axes and horse riding as well if you want him to be. So he can be like a really, really good vengeance bot if you want him to be. He doesn't have Persecution Complex like Bernadetta, so I still think he has a bit of a flaw there, and it takes a little longer to tutor him because he joins a little bit later. But at base already, he's qualified for Brigand basically. I think he's just like certify him into it right away. Stuff like that. Is like his weapon levels and his boons and stuff, they don't say S character or anything. They just say, hey, I'm meant for the best classes and like combat arts in the game. Go ahead and use me. Stats aren't very good, and especially first, I think he can be a little bit fragile in enemy phase. His stats aren't very good. But I do know that I think if you like rally strength, for example, he can just like one round things with point blank volley if you want him to. Even in church route, which is his worst performance, he joins like much later with relatively bad bases. He can still get the Wyvern within like 1 month. I think I just contribute just fine. He's not that bad. I'm gonna put him like, again, Ranger had him in A, which I don't know if I'm ready for Cyril in A tier, but I would like to put him in like, I would put him above Hubert at least. I would like to put him in like B+ at the very least. I'm not progressive enough to put him in A quite yet, but I could see him in B+ somewhere. So how about for now we strand him like somewhere around here. I don't know, I still feel like Leon, for example, is a better unit. I still feel like Canas is a more solid unit. But I think Cyril is pretty good overall as a unit in three houses, as long as you can get past his base stats, which I think his arts allow him to. And I've run out of TBD units. I've done them all, at least I think I did. I should probably check my checklist, but I'm sure if I forgot someone, you guys will inform me in the comments. So thanks to everyone for submitting characters. Thanks for supporting me on Patreon. Hope you enjoyed this super long video once again. And the next tier list video will probably be a archetype tier list again, because a lot of people like those as well. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this whole thing in 3 batches rather than 2, because I just had that many submissions. I know how many I'll have that next month. I'm going to make sure that the next one is posted before the end of August, so people who pledged for August can submit characters. If you want to pledge, then you might want to wait until September started, so you don't get charged twice, because I charge up front. And that way you probably get more, bang for your buck. I'll leave that up to you. I'll make sure that submissions stay open at least until a little bit into September, so both people who only are going to pledge in August and people who can pledge in September are able to submit. That's all for now. I will see you guys next time. Peace out, goodbye, and thanks for watching.